Hey, one thing to come today. Can everyone hear us okay? We don't need a microphone. We don't need a microphone. So today we're here to talk about PureCloud Analytics, kind of an intro, some of what we do, and some best practices. I'm Mike Mulligan. I lead the analytics team on PureCloud.
I'm Taz. I work for Mike. He's a pretty good boss.
Most of the time. And so yeah, today, brief intro to what the team does, walk through some of the data we model to sort of help understand, otherwise it's a bunch of abstractions. Current state of what you can do with the API, some live demos, because that makes it interesting, and best practices. So what is analytics? Really, it's a core piece of the platform. We were asked earlier today if it's an add-on for the product or something you have to pay separately for. It's just ever-present. We're listening to what everyone else within PureCloud is doing. We're collecting data for other engineering teams and data scientists to do whatever other analysis or to build other features on top of that. We're a very data-first company, processing tens of millions of events a day, and every day is bigger. So yeah, numbers. And so additionally, all the big data stuff tends to be within our realm of influence, and so there's a lot of the tech jargon, soup, Spark, Flink, and the like if you're into that. We build a bunch of microservices as well as real-time and batch data pipelines for other teams as well. And yeah, so in short, we move data around. I don't know if anyone remembers Planet Fitness. But so that's all very abstract. So I like to ground this a little bit by kind of talking through a more concrete example that I think everyone can relate to. In the realm of call centers, you have a phone call, someone calls in to pay their bill. How would you model that? What does that actually look like? And there are a lot of different ways you could model a phone call. You could draw various sequence diagrams, you could do SIP ladders, you could do state machines, and they would all give you kind of a different story of the life of a phone call. But something that you may have seen within the application is this timeline view, and it's really kind of a combination of many of these views. So you get the who, the what, and the when in that sort of party model sequence diagram view. And so just to get some common vocabulary here, this will be useful later, I swear, is within any one of these interactions, we call the whole thing a conversation. It has participants. Otherwise, you just talk to yourself. So the participants are the human and system actors within the call, like the ACD routing, the customer, the agent. Going further down, each participant has sessions. That would be like the media channel, phone, chat, what have you. And then within that, you have segments. So that's sort of the state changes within each of those sessions. Like the phone is ringing, the phone is on hold for Mike, that sort of thing. And so additionally, on top of that, we can derive some metrics. You can start bookending some of those segments to derive other common things like, hey, assignment appeared, so that is an offer to a queue. Or the agent, marked something on hold. We should time how long they did that. Did they go take a lunch break during that hold? How long did they work on after call work? And so within metrics, there are many different flavors. If anyone's already integrated with the API, you may be familiar with this documentation. But since this will come up later, there's sort of a common notation we use where the names of metrics start with N, T, and O to denote counters, timers, and observations. And each of these metrics are composed of basic statistics, so sums, counts, min-max. So that then you can derive other metrics if you so desire, like averages within a larger scope. And so it's one thing to look at these metrics individually, but then let's mash them together. I very proudly can count up to 100. And so if you look at the world in aggregate, you can start deriving higher level KPIs about your call center. So then we might get into the realm of aggregating across time intervals to start making more business relevant decisions. So maybe that average speed of answer in the past 30 minutes. What was the service level during the past month? What's the queue volume? That sort of thing. And so, just for sake of example, because otherwise I'm just waving my hand with no pictures about numbers, say we have this very real table of data that hopefully makes sense, where we have one metric, T-talk. So we're looking at 4 separate calls over time, how long the agent was talking on each one of those calls, and we're going to look at 2 separate dimensions within that. The agent that took the call and the queue that the call came in on. So those agent and queue are dimensions, metadata, and you can imagine several other dimensions that would be relevant to the call. And then we can slice and dice across that to derive different metrics. Like say if we wanted to look at that 30-minute view of the world, which is very common, we might want to partition it on that half-hour interval, focus only on the queue support, and you get one certain answer for talk time and one certain average there. But perhaps instead we'd like to look at how well Agent Mike did, and you can see it's the same data set, same partitioning, but you get sort of different answers, and you can see what a great job I do yammering on. But so maybe we want to aggregate in 1-hour buckets instead of 30-minute buckets. You get the idea here. Additionally, we could start layering on some other ways to filter this data. If anyone's played with SQL before, group bys would be kind of a common thing. How would we might have the same filter. We're looking for Agent Mike, but we want to naturally separate it by the queue that Mike was on. What was the talk time there? And we can see how, in general, Mike is much faster at doing support calls by a whole minute on average than billing calls. So that's one way of looking at the data in the past and up to right now, but then we could also, instead of aggregating things, look at sort of the infinitesimally small, right now, like instantaneous view of the world. So no pretty lines and boxes here, but if instead we say the time right now is 2:48, what do we know? What is the current state of the universe? And again, same data, different view of the world. So that's more your dashboard, heads-up display, quick pulse on the now. So for that real-time focused supervisor, that's the kind of flavor of data that they're probably looking at, your wallboard sort of situation. So bringing all that back together, we've been talking about one flavor of data this whole time, conversation data, and there are sort of 3 distinct perspectives that you can take on this. Your detailed record view of the world, that cradle-to-grave timeline, your aggregated metric view of the world, and that instantaneous observation. And so there are several other flavors of data within PureCloud where we essentially take this same 3-pillared treatment to it. In some cases, it's not quite all 3. For like your quality management centric, like evals, evaluation data, flow, aggregate data, surveys, like evaluations, and user status. What did people do all day? How long did someone take a meal break? That sort of thing. And so, given all that, before I'm through on time, so back to the API. Why presumably we're all here. We're serious about the API, and it's what we build everything on top of here. While I mentioned the whole database soup earlier, that is all sort of back-end secret sauce. Ultimately, we present one API, which is then surfaced through the public API to all of you fine people. And it is also what we're using to build UIs, to build reporting, to build all the other features that rely on analytics internally. So you get what we get. There's a lot of documentation available on Dev Center. A big plug for the folks who keep this in fantastic shape. And so with that, I'll switch over to Taz's computer here for demo time.
Awesome. Well, if you thought that was boring, this is going to be worse. And we're going to do a live demo, some live data. So what could go wrong? Generally, we've had history where demos seem to go great. So I'm going to try and do that to you right now.
Let's see, you're not on the screen yet.
See, this is exactly what I mean. We're having technical difficulties.
There you go.
Or maybe not. So, there you go. But anyway, so what I'm going to actually now show you guys is a bunch of queries, and we'll try to come up with like a scenario, and we'll see how we can use the scenario to help us understand how to navigate through an API and how to maybe infer something that might be meaningful to you as a use case. Would you make it bigger? I can try. Is that better?
There you go.
All right, awesome. Well, so we're going to do like a very basic query where I'm going to be like, which is some of the queries that we see from customers, which is, hey, for a 30-day interval, can you give me an aggregated view of my call center? Like, what does that look like? And so let's see what that looks like. Because now since I've zoomed in so much, just go back up for the body. Alright, so this is basically all I've done is you can see the interval is a 30-day interval, something to be mindful about. What is inaccurate with this interval? Firstly, it goes to a couple of days in the future, which is sort of meaningless. I mean, we do support it, but we would prefer if you did not do that. And let's say, so what is this that we're looking at? So we grouped by a media type. So we have voice, chat, email, etc. And so for this particular media type, this is all the metrics that I can get. There's a lot going on: abandons, alerts, answer, and so it's overwhelming. And that's just a single media type. And then you go on to chat, etc. What I'm going to do is let's just look at SLA. Let's just see how our agents have been doing, and let's just narrow it down to like all the communication that is all those instances when we missed our SLA. So my query gets changed slightly, and it sort of looks like this now, which is just a simple filter that says, just give me this particular metric, and let's see what the response for that looks like. So much more readable and much more filtered, and so it shows that chat is not doing so well. Maybe our agents need some more training. Why are they missing so much? Why are they performing so poorly compared to N over SLA? I mean, I'm assuming that these same agents are also handling voice, so they're either overworked or something is going on, and let's see why that is the case. So what would actually help is maybe it's one queue. Maybe some agents are not trained for a particular queue. Let's find out which queue is the problem queue.
Before you go ahead, and just since there's a lot of braces, I'm sure you're all going to be tabs spawned in the back, but just to talk through a little bit. So that result body was very long, and so the initial query tabs have is for a time interval of 1 month and for one particular metric. And so you'll see within this first blob, we have this labeled group. This is only the things that are voice conversations. We're told what interval this was. Right now it's the month that was queried for. If there was more than one metric like we first saw, that we'd see that listed out, but in this case it's only the one we asked for, N over SLA. And then, like I mentioned earlier, each metric is composed of basic statistics. Since N over SLA and a counter, there's only one meaningful statistic for a counter, it's a count. And so within that body of stats you have a count of 5. Sorry.
This is what he does every day to me. It's like micromanaging, but it's fine. I can get past that. Anyways, so like I said, I would like to know what queue is the problem queue. Are we missing all the SLA on that particular queue? So again, another sort of filter. So let's group our entire result set by queues. For the purpose of this demo and keep things simple, we've only configured one queue in this account. But what I would like you to understand is there's multiple queues. You would see all the metrics basically grouped by those queue IDs. So in this case, this is the problem queue, and this is the queue in which we're missing all the SLA. Let's further narrow it down to the media type. We don't care about voice. Voice is doing pretty well. Let's filter other results further and just to show you what that filter looks like. So let's understand this filter. Basically, the previous query remains the same. It's just we keep tacking on more stuff to the query, which is, hey, give me a filter and make sure that the result set has this particular queue ID and also has only and has like media type chat. So the output for this would be a further filtered down result set of what we just saw, which is does this, a simple view of what this is. And while this is extremely useful, well, I still don't know what day or what time of the month this happened, or like what led to this. We also offer granularity, which is, you can use 15-minute, hourly, daily, different granularities. Let's go and narrow this down to see what days the SLA is getting worse. Like, is there a certain spike in the N over SLA? Is it like a constant trend? Is it going up? And we can easily navigate that once we put in the right granularity. So this is all I add to my query. All this is saying is break up my result set into daily granularities. And let's see what the response for that looks like. So, and by default, we use, so you can also order your queries, and the ordering is in just like ascending order. And so you have different N over SLAs. Yeah, some days are not so bad, some days are worse. Based on this, you can make some, informed decisions, such as like, maybe, on Fridays my agents are not paying attention, or I don't know, like, or maybe the supervisor picked the wrong agent for the wrong queue on this day, and since then the trend for the SLA has just been getting poor, etc. So there's a lot of things you can basically infer from like a simple query. What I've done is, this is just the aggregate view. So Mike mentioned we have aggregate, observation, and details. Now I want to get down to the nitty-gritty. Maybe it's not the agent, maybe it's something else. Let's understand what's actually happening in those conversations for that day. So I picked a particular day, because we had a 30-day interval. There's no point getting all the conversations for 30 days if we know that there's this particular day which is a problem day. And so I move over now to like the query
Separate endpoint.
Yeah, it's a separate endpoint, and the response body is extremely similar. It's basically, again, to start with an interval, and now I've narrowed down the interval to like a day that I think is a problem day that I want to investigate further. And now you will see the response object, however, is like very different. And let's understand some more. It's basically, this is every conversation that happened on that particular day, and every single interaction within the conversation for the day. So let's just look at one conversation from that day. So this is basically all the different participants that were part of the conversation. So in this particular example, there's just one participant, but you would find some other examples where you could have multiple participants, where you could have customer, agent, ACD, etc. And then within the participant, we have a bunch of sessions, like Mike was saying, and within the session we have a bunch of segments. The segments give you we also expose the metrics for those segments for that particular session in the details itself. So sometimes you might not even need aggregated data. You could get most of that information from this single query. But again, what I'm trying to emphasize is this is not the best query, right? Just an interval, like a blanket, give me all conversations for a day is not ideal. And you want the queries to be smarter. From the aggregate query, we already know the problem QID. So let's filter our results for just that QID. There's no point getting all the conversations for all the queries. And so this is what that query would look like, and you would have a response filtered out to that particular, QID. Further, what we could do is we know the particular media type. That was the problem media type. We did not care about voice because voice was doing fine. So you can further tag on and add this as a dimension. This is what it would look like. Finally, let's say you narrowed down a particular conversation that you wanted to tease out, and you wanted to understand if that agent is actually doing a good job. So you can then add additional conversation filters where you can actually even tease out like an individual conversation ID. And this is what it would eventually end up looking like. This is it. This is the entire result. So from thousands of conversations for the day, we've narrowed it down to a single conversation. And in this conversation, we can navigate through what were the participants, what were the different metrics, what were the segments, and then you can also pick up the user ID from this. And
before we jump on that real quick, it's that detail record view we were discussing earlier, and if you look in the application, sort of within the UIs, you'll see there's a grab bag of dimensions in here, many of which you can search on, and many other things as well. But so a thing that commonly came up in the past was you mentioned metrics in here. People would want to look through the detail records and say, how do I derive the metrics, and try to sort of backdoor engineer what the right computation was, or have a boutique alternate. You can make your alternate computation, but we provide you the same ones here that you would get in that aggregate view. The difference here is if it happens more than once, you're going to see it more than once. It's not, no aggregation is happening here. So like if it was one agent and then transferred to another, you would see two separate T-talks next to the block where it actually happened.
It basically goes from alerting to interact to hold back to interact, which is why you see, an alerting answer T-talk, and then eventually you'll see an alerting T-talk held again. So it depending on the kind, like Mike said, just to reiterate, like we don't aggregate any of that here. If an interaction happened, we tell you what that metric for that is. And so basically, from all the aggregates and now from the details, I've pretty much teased out, a user ID that I care about, and I know that this user is an agent. So I just take his, and now this is going to a different. We're going back to user aggregates. We were at conversation aggregates. Now we're in user aggregates, and for that particular user, I'm curious to see like how has he been doing the last 10 days? What has he been doing in the queue? And so again, it's the response object looks the body looks very similar, and the response object will change, and this is what it looks like. So basically, these are the different statuses that he was on, the agent. This is the aggregated view for the last 10 days. Again, those are just the system-wide presences. We also have like the organization specific, because your organization could have like something different as a status for breaks or meals, etc. So this agent has this particular presence. The routing status is this. He's been offline. He's been offline for a certain amount of time. He's been available for a certain amount of time. He's been on queue for this amount of time. As a supervisor, you can make decisions like, is he idle for too long? Is he idle for really less time? Is this, am I not giving him any breathing room to actually make better decisions? Or is he overworked? Is he underworked? And so I thought, what's the best way to basically understand this better? I decided to take the luxury of using Mike's user ID. Mike was not PTO yesterday, so he should have been working. So let's just analyze what Mike was doing yesterday. And it seems like it should give us a good idea of how active and how well he was serving our customers, It seemed like Mike took a lot of breaks and meals, and
A lot of good food.
yeah, and like you can see, he was offline a lot too. So that tells me maybe I'm just misunderstanding. Maybe it's just maybe this isn't like the best query. But I also have proof. I found out that Mike had gone skiing. He went skiing to Arafo Basin, and ignore the person in front. That's not
He was
important.
working hard that day.
Yeah. Also, he went on a trek. All this on company dime. Let this be heard. And finally, there was also alcohol involved. So I want to leave it here is that basically,
not before he took all the forks.
Yep. And then yes, there was also an incident where he took a fork from the hotel or restaurant. But in any case, the whole point of the exercise was we started off with all the aggregations for the entire call center for 30 days. We narrowed it down to a particular conversation that we wanted to worry about. We then further drew it back out to how the agent performed for 10 days, and then we just looked at all his performance yesterday. This gives you like some insight into how flexible the API is and how much you can slice and dice and drill into or out to get a view of what is happening. And I'll stop talking now and let Mike take over.
That's not live demo. And so, let's see. the second that cuts over. And so, while we had those queries, saved and at the ready, because we thought we could be prone to typos otherwise, the query grammar, while it looks a little long in the tooth, is actually very similar across all these endpoints. And so our goal here was to show something more exploratory with the API. But obviously you can service whatever other use cases there. And there's a lot more in those query grammars as well, all on the Dev Center and documented. For instance, around, you could do short abandons is a common thing. While we don't present short abandons in the app, there are filters you can apply to sort of bound your views and further refine those queries. But so that three common perspective thing, I'm going to keep beating that drum. The endpoints here, we have that aggregate endpoint, the detail records, and the observations. But so since you all seem like nice people, I was told legally I had to say this, yada yada roadmap stuff, no promises, what have you. So you all agreed by being here, you signed the agreement at the door. But something that we're looking to add to our API soon is basically something that still has that almost exact same shape as the detail record endpoint, the query grammar, and the response payload. But for the people who like to pull back large volumes of data, where the restrictions we have on the current endpoint are inconvenient, this is meant to be more bulk-friendly access. And so if anyone's used the Analytics API today, if you supply no filters, we say, okay, 7 days. Sorry, you can not go bigger than 7 days on the data. If you do supply filters, then we cap you at 30 days. And so then what we found is for some larger customers, they stack up a lot of 30-day queries and just pound through that as fast as they can. So the idea here is that we want to offer another solution that you would submit a job, a query essentially, with different, much more lax limitations, so that you submit your query, you get sort of a token to come check back when it's done, so you're less latency sensitive is the idea here. And when it is done, then you can just iterate through, and pulling back each page of data is not rerunning that query again. So stay tuned, but it's that one I think should be a pretty easy integration for anyone who currently has one. Yes?
You guys have for some other stuff, you're doing a lot of stuff with events, like why don't you just throw an event on some?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
For other stuff, you're doing a lot of events, you can subscribe to events, like that would be perfect.
It's something we're exploring and we haven't nailed down just yet. We would like to explore that though, because no one wants to poll.
Yeah, right now you have to poll, but there could definitely be in the roadmap eventually we could tell you or notify you that all right, this is when your query is ready, you can start streaming your results. But yes, that's definitely a possibility.
What is granularity of your time dimension in aggregates?
In aggregates, you can go down as fine as a minute.
Depending on the interval, because we want eventually we don't want you to have such a big response object back that the query fails on your end, and then it also keeps having our databases. So it's a combination of.
I mean, if I'm looking historical interval reports, is it 30 minutes or 15 minutes? How can I break down?
So on our end, we actually store it all as it happened as the original raw events. So there's no glossiness on the storage side of things. From the query side of things, you can go as fine as 1 minute. Within the UIs and the reporting, correct me if I'm wrong, we present 30 minutes because that tends to be the most common ask. But if you're using the API, you can go finer. But to Taz's point, if you requested 1 month at 1 minute granularity,
that will not work because there's this
unless you don't have a lot of data going on. But if you do, that would be a crazy huge response payload. We have to pull back a lot of data. Your client might crash as well if megabytes of JSON come over your wire too.
Just thinking on that, if you pulled conversation detail, because you have all the timestamps which are down to microseconds, or milliseconds, you could, if you wanted to, model that up to the millisecond.
Yeah, and you don't have to give even you could do weird intervals if you so desire.
Let's say if I want to do 30 minutes interval aggregates for the day, how are calls associated? Because obviously you can have one call spanning multiple intervals. So how do you associate conversation with intervals?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So from the aggregate world, we spit out the metrics when they are fully knowable. So like talk time, you don't know when you start, you don't know in the middle, you know it when that talk segment has ended. And so whatever bucket of time that would fall in, that's where T-talk would land. Whereas things like assignment, like an offer, the number of offers to a queue, that is knowable instantaneously because it just happens. And so that would land in that bucket. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So basically, if call comes in one interval, I will have call counts in that interval, but talk time will be potentially in the next one.
Correct.
If it
Yes.
ended in the next one.
Correct.
And since questions came up, because this can obviously be complicated if you wanted to sort of balance out like your offers and your talk time to sort of ascertain the things should add up. There's T-talk to like count how long the talk was, but I mentioned you can have multiple instances of that, like an agent talked and then put someone on hold and then talked again, and that hold might be where your interval bucket changes over so that it could straddle across. There's also, for a few of the metrics, we have like a variant that spans over the whole thing and emits at the end of the participant their life cycle as opposed to the segment life cycle. So if that sort of eases your computation, we try to have within that hierarchy of conversation, participant, session, segment, for some of the metrics we have them at a coarser view. So they land in the right bucket for the right use case. The T-talk complete is an example of that for anyone who's already tinkered with the API. So I'll switch past this slide. So on to API performance tips, pro tips. Some valuable pro tip. So small adjustments to your queries can really reduce your payload size and speed up performance. It's not just because less data is coming back. It might mean we have to search for less data over the wire, less being retrieved, just less. If you know what you want, less is more. And so something we mentioned before was considering your granularity if you're doing aggregates in relation to your intervals. That a 1 week interval with a granularity of 5 minutes versus 1 day, vastly different number of results, those buckets you're going to get back. And then you might multiply that further if you have group buys in your query. Group buys, also they're going to be more performant for your low cardinality dimensions, like your QIDs, media type, things where you could probably, count to 100, as opposed to something that's really blown out like conversation ID. If you group by conversation ID, we'll give it to you, but you might find that the query response payload is going to be nuts.
We want you to assess like your use case. I mean, sure, there's a lot of ways you can retrieve the data, but it will make your lives and our lives simple if the data is presented to you back in like the most effective way. And so filters are going to be your friend, but you can't add like 200 filters to a query because that's just terrible. And
so on that note, only query for what you need if you know what you need. So if you find that you're getting data back and discarding it client side, but you could express that filter and have us do the work server side, please do. And same for the metrics. If you know what you want, specifically ask for it. Otherwise, our default behavior is equivalent to a select star. And if you find you just don't care about most of those metrics, there is a performance cost that will slow down your queries for just pulling that back. Additionally, any kind of wide open queries like the ones we were starting with in the demo where it's just an interval with no filters, that might lead to a situation where you have to iterate through one page at a time. And so if you find that you are deep paging through detail record queries, like something that might have 1,000 pages, behind the scenes, that's rerunning that query each page through, which is not terribly efficient. And you'll find that is less performant than if you are able to easily break your query up into something smaller. If not, obviously we should talk. But if it does sound like something you already do, that jobs endpoint I alluded to, stay tuned for that scraping through deep paginated data. But otherwise, if none of this quite feels right, we'd love to hear from you on what use cases you're trying to solve for, and if there's something we could do better. Another one, and this one's for you, Tim. Rate limiting. It's a thing all across PureCloud API endpoints. It's the HTTP 429 response code. Not everyone looks at the HTTP status codes, but if you're working with the API, you really should. 429 is our polite way of saying, slow down, come back real soon, and it is targeted to you. It means that you are going too fast or using too many resources, and being a common good, we want to protect the platform. Tim?
To add on to that, there is a retry after header that comes back on 429 responses, so that tells you when you can start making requests again. When the rate limiter is done on your chill.
Yeah, so you don't have to guess. We even tell you when we'll be happy again.
We're really good at our jobs.
What is the rate limit?
It is, I forget what it's currently set at, to be honest, but it's one of those things we deliberately don't make an explicit promise around.
Because it can change.
Yeah, it's one of those, if we can go faster, we do, but it's meant to avoid the tragedy of the commons. If everyone can go whole hog and it is detrimental to the platform, we need a knob to be able to keep everyone equal.
So it's dynamic?
It's dynamic. It's admittedly pretty generous. Kevin?
Thanks for the answer. I'll answer those. It's generally 300 a second. There are some resources that are 300 per bit. That's a good price.
And for us, we do it separately per endpoint as well. So still pretty wide open.
And again, those numbers are not promised. It can change depending on the, even just the environment that you're running your queries against. So.
And so last one in the pro tips. Generally, batching is good. We all work with software. However, sometimes what we have observed is customers might really smash a lot of disjoint queries together for the sake of only doing one query. And I appreciate the consideration. But sometimes these queries would be far larger than this slide. And the data sets are all actually completely disjoint. And so in this case, this is a real query. We have a, forget the interval, granularity of 1 day, a 5-dimension group by media type, QID, direction, language, and skills for the agents. And skills is multi-dimensional data. And then you have these groups of filters. It's an OR of, and then these are ended. Media type voice Q1 inbound English, or chat Q2 outbound English. The only commonality here is English. So really, then someone's going to have to go through some machinations to parse the responses out and separate those as they need them to be. Ultimately, this could easily be decomposed into 2 separate queries. The response payload is probably going to be more manageable. Am I saying doing that's faster? No. Depending on your situation, you might want to actually just empirically measure what's more performant for you. But something to think about. Lastly, I'm supposed to plug the services people. If all this sounds great, but you're not currently using the API, it's, ideally, we think it's pretty good. We think it's pretty easy. But if you'd like a quick start and not have to do all the initial legwork, they're very versed in doing so and very familiar. And so with that, I guess I'll kick off to any other questions. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question. Do you guys have any thought about like a query language analyzer? So you can say, hey, don't run a query, but tell me how crappy this one is or how good it is, and sort of let folks figure that, instead of, I get what you're saying, but it's almost like it's sort of nice to be able to say, hey, I think this is good, is that good? No, it's not, here's why.
It's, I had not considered, but it is an interesting idea.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty cool idea.
Yeah, it's, so noted.
Yeah.
I get like a penny every time something.
It's, we wanted to have raffles. We were told maybe not so much. But I will give you a penny.
Or you can give us your resume.
Any other? Yes.
I'm having trouble getting a lot of our direct campaigns migrated up. We're a BPL outsourcer where I've got a bunch of different clients and some campaigns just marrying all together. And I need to be able to grab out contact list complete conversation history, where I'm used to hitting on Pure Connect, like our call history at a dialer, to be able to say, on this contact list, give me all the detailed conversations for the last 15 minutes or last hour.
I see.
And I've been running up against a dead end there. Is that jobs that's going to kind of fill that need, or
I think that will, because right now, I presume you've tried hitting the detail record endpoint, and it's
tells me
not
now
going
my
super fast.
conversation ID.
Yeah.
The only method I found is pull down like the contact list in an Excel kind of export and then loop through each one. So then grab
That's
the
right. Yeah, I
That was pretty nasty, and I'm assuming his job's kind of going to be the shining solution.
it's I believe, and this is where Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, on the diver side of things, I don't know if there's currently an API endpoint to export the contact lists, and because since you mentioned the Excel files, I think that was one of those
Yeah, I think
hotspots.
it's a contact list just fine. It's the detailed, okay,
Yeah,
I
and
did
then-
4 attempts, but give me each of those individual 4 attempts, the disposition of the time that occurred, and that granularity that I need.
So
Yeah.
you can do that. If in your analytics query you have filter on the campaign ID, that will give you results for the campaign. Now you still have to time box it with your interval. So you know, if you're looking for results from today, it's not going to give you attempts that were made on that contact yet. But you can filter by campaign.
So I could do that on an hourly basis.
And then ultimately, for the hypothetical jobs endpoint that no one's promising, that depending on the volume that you're pulling, you might find that's more performant. And again, just to reiterate, the notion there is for the existing detail record endpoint is I need my answer and I need it now. And the jobs endpoint is I need my answer, so, like seconds, minutes, not like hours, days.
Yeah,
is the idea.
Yeah, the async or the endpoint that we're going to expose, it's the polling is only we ideally hope it will be like within the minute for how long you have to poll, and the intervals will be extremely
Depending on your data volume.
yeah, and again, yeah, the intervals can be generous compared to what we expose right now.
Yes.
I've got a customer that needs to slice their data up in a variety of ways, including using external contacts data. So they've got about 90,000 contacts, and they'll look at how many calls they had, what the handle times of those. So they're pulling out conversation detail because they need all of the information. The trouble is mapping that to aggregates, because the metrics information on the dev forum is the calculation, but there's not the map between this is the detail in the conversation all the way through. Is that something that as you mentioned earlier, it's sort of secret sauce? Is that piece going to be documented or planned to be at some point?
Like as far as how the metrics themselves are computed?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is something we need to add further to the documentation. Is there a format you're looking for beyond sort of human readable docs, or?
Human readable would be, it's where I get a query from, in this case there's a ClickView developer that then goes off and does stuff and says, I've got this, and then I have to explain that's a call that changed into a callback, and that means this data's over there. So I have to go back to a conversation in PureCloud,
I see.
map it to what it was and say this is
What it
how you
really-
calculated it.
Okay.
So I have to reverse engineer
Sure.
when someone comes up with a scenario that doesn't match what's in the PureCloud UI. And if that were documented,
Yeah, that would go a long ways. Yeah, no, I will make a point of. I know that section of our
it's
docs
complicated,
pretty light.
I quite
Yeah.
understand, but it's
Yeah, it could use some love.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's noted. You would also get a penny.
Macy, don't you have a session that's kind of related to that, talking about reporting and correlating that with the data?
Yeah, so the next session is going to be basically reverse engineering PureCloud reports. So for some of our top reports, how do you get that data?
That's a good plug.
But it'll be an intercession with Macy.
So we're going to go next session.
What?
So when are you presenting?
Oh, in like 15 minutes?
In this room?
Yeah, in the same room.
I'll keep receipts.
All right, now it's you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm curious, how latent is the data? So when the call is being made, how long does it take to appear in that historical API?
So we don't make any distinction on the API side for historical or real time. So ideally, everything is as close to real time as we can get it currently. So you should be seeing results fairly immediately. There's not a formal service level, but it's like seconds kind of situation. So you should see whatever you're looking for.
No, put your hand down.
So this may be a trick question, but so if I'm trying to retrieve my custom attributes or business data that I may have appended to an analytic or to my conversations, is that coming with the jobs API?
Yes, the much loved participant attributes from. So if you append any kind of key value data within your flows, this is an ask we have heard to. It's not currently available in the detailed record data, that real-time endpoint. However, it is. It'll make its first appearance on the job side, and then we'll come back around to the real-time side.
This magical, mystical jobs API.
Yes, yeah. Who's
that doesn't exist. When is it coming?
Our no promises hope is very soon, but I can't. My PM is not in the room, and she would have an opinion if I made you promises.
We've been using it extensively internally, so we are optimistic about it. We'll leave it at that.
We don't want to kick the tires real hard before we open it up, because we expect it will see some good abuse. So we want to feel good about it.
So will there be any opportunities for like beta?
Yeah, if you are super keen on that, please do reach out through whatever your normal channels are, or come reach out to us at some point after.
We wouldn't mind making you guys, if you're serious about using that API, we could definitely work with product and other people in the company and make you guys beta users of that API, so you can give us feedback and actually start using it for whatever you have use cases for.
She's good.
Yeah. We paid her for those questions.
Yeah.
No, we didn't.
Any other questions, or I'm not sure if we're at time or if we're at time for a break, or I've lost track. 4 more minutes? Then you all just got 4 more minutes of your day back. Unless you have anything else. It's the greatest gift I can give up here. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.